Hello there, and welcome. It's so good to have you here with us tonight. We're about to journey to a place where the line between the physical and the spiritual becomes beautifully, peacefully blurred. We're heading to the ancient forests of Japan, to walk among living beings that have stood watching for 1,000 years or more. These are the real sacred trees, the quiet giants that inspired stories of immense wise beings like the Great Deku Tree. It's a story not of fantasy, but of a profound and real relationship between humanity and the natural world. I'm so grateful you've chosen to spend this time with me. If you enjoy what we do here, this gentle exploration of life's quiet marvels, I'd be honored if you'd consider liking this little documentary or subscribing to the channel. It just helps these stories find others who might be looking for a bit of calm, and I always love to know who I'm sharing this quiet space with, so feel free to leave a comment and let me know what city or country you're listening from tonight. It's a wonderful thought, all of us around the world settling in together. But that can wait. For now, the only thing to do is to prepare for our journey. Dim the lights, if you haven't already. Find that perfect cool spot on your pillow. Let your shoulders relax and take a slow, deep breath. Let the day dissolve. We are leaving the busy world of schedules and screens behind. We're going to shrink down, not in size but in speed, to match the patient, deep rhythm of the forest. Let's go there together now. Chapter 1. The Soul of the World, Shinto, Kami, and the Sanctity of Nature. Before we can even begin to understand what makes a tree sacred, we must first try to feel the world as the people who first sanctified them did. We have to step into a different kind of perception, one that existed long before the grand temples and bustling cities of modern Japan. We must go back to the source, to the deep green heart of the islands themselves. Imagine, just for a moment, that you are standing in an old-growth forest in Japan. The air itself feels different here. It's heavy, not with heat, but with moisture and the scent of life and decay, a rich, loamy perfume of damp earth, moss, and the sharp, clean fragrance of cedar, sugi they call it. The light is a soft emerald green, filtered through a canopy so dense that only the most determined rays of sun manage to dapple the forest floor. All around you, the trunks of ancient trees rise like the pillars of a vast natural cathedral. Their bark is gnarled and textured, a universe of its own, carpeted in thick velvet moss and delicate clinging ferns. There is a profound silence here, but it isn't an empty silence. It's a quiet, filled with presence. You can hear the gentle drip of water from leaf to leaf, the distant call of a bird you cannot see, the almost imperceptible rustle of something small moving through the undergrowth. And beneath it all, there is a deeper hum, a feeling of immense, slow, and patient life. You are not just looking at a forest, you are standing inside a single breathing organism, and you are a tiny temporary part of it. This feeling, this overwhelming sense of presence in nature, is the very bedrock of Japan's indigenous spirituality, Shinto. Shinto doesn't have a founder like Buddha or Christ. It doesn't have a single sacred text like the Bible or the Quran. It has no grand, overarching commandments. In its purest, oldest form, it is less a religion and more a way of seeing. The word Shinto itself translates to the way of the gods, or more accurately, the way of the kami. And to understand the kami is to understand everything that follows. We often translate kami as gods or spirits, but this is a profound oversimplification, a bit like trying to describe the entire color blue to someone who has only ever seen in black and white. A kami is not necessarily a personified, anthropomorphic deity sitting on a throne in the clouds. A kami is a presence, an essence, a power that inspires a sense of awe or reverence. It is the life force that animates the world. Anything in nature that is extraordinary, that possesses a quality of greatness or wonder, can be a kami, or more accurately, can be a vessel for the presence of kami. Think of the raw, unstoppable power of a typhoon. That is a kami. The breathtaking, terrifying beauty of a volcano, rumbling with the heat of the Earth's core. That is a kami. A magnificent waterfall, crashing down with a roar that seems to shake the very stones, its mist coating everything in a layer of fine droplets. That too is a kami. But it isn't just the grand and the powerful. A kami can also be found in the subtle and the quiet. The gentle spirit of a particular spring that has provided clean water for a village for centuries. The protective essence of a mountain that shields a valley from the harshest winds. The generative force that pushes the bamboo shoots up from the earth with such astonishing speed in the spring. Even a strangely shaped rock, one that looks almost sculpted by an unseen hand, can be recognized as having a kami presence. Shinto, at its heart, is a form of animism. It is the belief that the world is not an inanimate collection of resources for human use, but a vibrant, living community of beings and energies, all interconnected. Humans are not separate from or superior to nature. We are simply one part of it, one manifestation of the world's life force, alongside the rivers, the mountains, the animals, and the trees. In this worldview, respect is the native language. Gratitude is the default currency. To pollute a river isn't just an act of environmental carelessness, it is an act of disrespect to the kami of that river. To level a forest without thought is not just deforestation, it is the destruction of a sacred dwelling place. This is not a system of belief that needs to be learned from a book. It is something felt instinctively. It arises naturally from living in a land of such dramatic and often dangerous natural beauty. Japan is a place of earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanoes, and typhoons. Nature's power is not an abstract concept, it is an immediate and tangible reality. Living in such an environment fosters a deep humility and a profound respect for the forces that are so much larger than oneself. You don't challenge the volcano, you honor its power and pray for its calm. You don't command the sea, you give thanks for its bounty and respect its fury. This relationship, born of awe and vulnerability, is the fertile ground from which the idea of the sacred tree grows. So within this world teeming with the presence of kami, how does a single specific object become a recognized focal point for this divine energy? How does a forest full of trees give rise to one particular tree that is considered sacred? This is where the concept of the yorishiro comes into play. A yorishiro is, quite literally, an approach substitute. It is a physical object that acts as a vessel, an antenna, or a temporary residence for a kami. It is a beacon that calls the kami down to the human world, providing a place for them to inhabit so that humans can interact with them, make offerings, and pray. A yorishiro can be many things. In some of the oldest Shinto shrines, the most sacred object, hidden away from all eyes, is not a statue or an idol, but something from nature, a uniquely shaped stone, a mirror representing the sun goddess, or an ancient sword. But perhaps the most common, the most visible, and the most universally understood yorishiro is a living tree. Why a tree? Think about it from a purely physical perspective. An ancient tree is a living bridge between worlds. Its roots delve deep into the earth, into the dark, mysterious underworld, drawing up water and nutrients, anchoring it to the very foundation of the world. Its trunk stands firmly in our world, the world of the living, a massive, steadfast presence, and its branches reach high into the sky, towards the heavens, the celestial realm of the most powerful kami. It is a physical axis, a central pillar connecting the three realms of the cosmos. It is a living ladder for the kami to descend. And then there is the matter of time. A human life is a fleeting thing, a brief flicker of 70, 80, maybe 100 years. We are ephemeral. But a great tree, a Cryptomeria japonica or a Cinnamomum camphora, can live for 1,000 years, 2,000. Some are believed to be even older. Imagine what such a being has witnessed. It stood as a sapling when samurai were first coming to power. It was already ancient when the first European ships arrived on Japan's shores. It has felt the tremors of 1,000 earthquakes, endured the winds of 1,000 typhoons, and watched countless generations of human families live and die at its feet. It is not just a plant, it is a living chronicle. It is a repository of memory, a silent historian whose rings tell a story far older than any human text. To stand in the presence of such a tree is to feel the immense humbling weight of deep time. How could such a being not possess a powerful spirit? How could it not be a worthy vessel for a great kami? The sheer scale of these trees also commands reverence. In a dense forest, they are the ones that break through the canopy, dominating the skyline. Their trunks can be immense, requiring a dozen people holding hands to encircle them. Their gnarled branches, thick as other trees' trunks, twist into shapes that seem to defy gravity, creating a unique and unforgettable silhouette. They become landmarks, not just geographically, but spiritually. They are individuals. You don't just see a forest, you see that tree, the old one, the great one, the one that has always been there. It is this combination of age, size, and unique character that singles out a tree from its neighbors. It becomes a natural candidate for a yorishiro, a place so full of life force that it naturally attracts and houses a kami. Once a tree, or a rock, or a waterfall is recognized as a yorishiro, a sacred space, it becomes necessary to mark it, to signify its special status. This is not to fence it off, but to honor it. This is the purpose of the Shimenawa. You have almost certainly seen one, even if you don't know the name. A Shimenawa is a rope, often very thick and heavy, woven from rice straw. Adorning the rope are shied, folded paper streamers cut into a distinctive zigzag pattern, like stylized bolts of lightning. When you see a Shimenawa wrapped around the trunk of an enormous tree, or strung between two sacred rocks, or hanging across the entrance of a shrine, you are seeing a boundary. But it is a boundary of a very special kind. It is not a wall to keep people out. It is a line that delineates the sacred from the mundane. On one side of the rope is the ordinary world, the world of everyday concerns. On the other side is a purified space, a place where the kami resides, a sanctuary. The Shimenawa acts as a kind of spiritual and symbolic purification. It is said to ward off evil or impure spirits, but more importantly, it serves as a signpost for the human heart. It says, pause, be present. You are now entering a place of reverence, show respect. The act of creating the Shimenawa is itself a ritual. The rice straw from which it is woven connects it to the cycle of agriculture, to the kami of the rice paddies who provide sustenance. The weaving is done with care and intention. The hanging of a new rope, often done once a year, is a major community event at many shrines. It is a renewal of the pact between the community and the kami, a reaffirmation of the sacredness of the place. The zigzag paper shide are also deeply symbolic. They are said to represent lightning, another powerful manifestation of a kami. In a world without electricity, lightning was a terrifying and awe-inspiring force, a literal connection between the heavens and the earth. Hanging these paper lightning bolts on the sacred rope reinforces the idea that this is a place where divine energy is concentrated, a place where the heavens touch the earth. So when you see a great camphor tree with a thick Shimenawa around its trunk, you are looking at the culmination of this entire worldview. You are seeing a being recognized for its immense age and life force, believed to be a yorishiro, a vessel for a powerful nature spirit, and formally marked and purified as a sacred space. You are not just looking at a piece of botany, you are looking at a living, breathing place of worship, a shrine that was not built by human hands but was grown by the earth itself. The rope is simply humanity's way of acknowledging the sanctity that was already there. It is a gesture of profound respect, an agreement to coexist with and honor the divine presence in the natural world. The roots of this belief system stretch back into the mists of prehistory, long before the arrival of Buddhism in the 6th century. The earliest written chronicles of Japan, the Kojiki, record of ancient matters, from 712 AD, and the Nihon Shoki, the Chronicles of Japan, from 720 AD, are our first textual windows into this world. While they are complex texts that blend myth, legend, and political history to legitimize the ruling imperial line, they paint a picture of a landscape that is thoroughly enchanted. The world they describe is alive with kami. The stories are not set in abstract, heavenly realms, but right here on the islands of Japan. Gods walk the earth, transform into animals, and inhabit mountains and rivers. The first emperor is the grandson of the sun goddess, Amaterasu, cementing the idea that the divine is not separate from the world, but intimately woven into its fabric, into its very geography and lineage. These texts describe a world where nature is an active participant in the story. A tree can speak. A rock can have a will of its own. A river can get angry. This is not seen as metaphor, but as the way the world works. The chronicles record instances of emperors making pilgrimages to famous mountains or capes to pay respect to the local kami. They tell of sacred trees being used for divination or as boundary markers. They show a courtly and political world that still operates with a fundamental understanding that the spirits of nature must be consulted, appeased, and honored. But the evidence goes back even further than these written texts. Archaeology gives us clues from the pre-literate periods. During the Jomon period, which lasted for thousands of years until around 300 BC, Japan was inhabited by hunter-gatherer societies. Archaeological sites from this era often show evidence of ritual activity centered on natural formations. Circles of stones, not unlike those found in other parts of the world, suggest ceremonial spaces. Artifacts are often found buried near distinct natural features, like large rocks or springs. While we can never know the precise details of their beliefs, the evidence strongly suggests a deep spiritual connection to the land. Of particular interest are finds of large polished stone rods and clay figurines, which are often interpreted as ritual objects. Some Jomon settlements appear to be arranged around a central open space, sometimes containing a large chestnut tree post, suggesting that trees may have already played a central role in village life and ceremony. The Jomon people lived in and with the forest. It provided their food, their fuel, their shelter. Their entire existence was predicated on a deep, intimate knowledge of the natural world and its cycles. It is almost impossible to imagine that this intimacy did not have a powerful spiritual dimension. The forest was not a resource, it was the entire context of their existence, a living entity that was both provider and powerful, unpredictable force. Later, in the Yayoi period, c. 300 BC, 300 AD, when rice cultivation was introduced and society became more settled and agricultural, this relationship with nature evolved. Now the focus expanded to include the kami of agriculture, of rainfall, of the rice paddies, but the reverence for the older, wilder nature spirits of the mountains and forests remained. The earliest Shinto shrines, called himrogi, were not buildings at all. They were simply sanctified areas of land, often a clearing in a forest, marked off with ropes, with a sacred evergreen tree branch at the center to act as the yorishiro. The shrine building, or honden, that we see today, was a later development, influenced by Buddhist temple architecture. The original shrine was the land itself, and its focal point was the tree. This long, unbroken thread of belief, stretching from the hunter-gatherers of the Jomon period to the rice farmers of the Yayoi, codified in the early imperial chronicles, and continuing to this day, is what created the cultural soil in which a 1,000-year-old tree could be seen not just as an old plant, but as a god. It is a worldview that sees divinity not in a transcendent, distant heaven, but immanently, right here in the world around us. It is the understanding that the rustle of leaves in the wind might just be the world whispering its secrets, and that by stopping, by listening, and by showing respect, we can begin to hear what it has to say. This is the soul of the world made manifest, and it is the key to understanding the profound sanctity of the great trees that stand as its oldest, wisest, and most magnificent guardians. They are the living heart of this ancient way of seeing, standing silently, patiently, waiting for us to remember how to listen. Chapter 2. Whispers in a Wood, the Folklore of Kodama, and the Spirits of the Forest. And so we find ourselves here, at the foot of these giants, waiting, and learning once more how to listen. For when you truly quiet your own mind, the forest begins to speak. It is not always in a language of wind and rustling leaves. Sometimes what you hear is something else entirely, a faint echo when there was no sound to cause it, a sudden sharp crack from the heart of a silent grove that sounds for all the world like a pained cry, a whisper on the air that seems to have a shape, a cadence, just beyond the edge of your understanding. This is where the old ways of seeing bleed into the old ways of hearing. For the people who have lived in the shadow of these great trees for millennia, these sounds were not random noise. They were the first hints of a hidden world, the first utterances of the spirits who call the deep woods their home. They were the voice of the Kodama. The word itself is a perfect key to this ancient belief. Kodama. Depending on how the characters are written, it can mean tree spirit, or it can mean echo. This is not a coincidence, it is a profound connection. In the mind of ancient Japan, the two were inseparable. An echo in a silent forest was not merely sound waves bouncing from a surface. How could it be? In a place so dense with leaves and soft earth, things that should absorb sound, not reflect it. No, an echo was a reply, a mimicry. It was the forest spirit, the Kodama, repeating your call, acknowledging your presence, or perhaps simply playing a game. The sound of a great tree groaning in the wind, or a sudden fall in the dead of night, was the spirit's own voice, a cry of sorrow or a shout of anger. The forest was not a collection of objects, it was a community of beings, and sound was their primary language. Imagine yourself, just for a moment, walking through one of these primordial forests. Let's leave our modern understanding behind, just for a while. The air is cool and smells of damp earth and the sharp, clean scent of cedar. Sunlight struggles to find you, dappling the mossy ground in shifting patterns of green and gold. It is quiet, but it is not silent. There is the gentle murmur of a hidden stream, the distant call of a bird. You are alone. and the trees that surround you are immense. Some are so old their bark is gnarled into shapes that look like sleeping faces, their highest branches lost in the canopy, forming a cathedral ceiling far above your head. You call out, perhaps just to hear a human voice, and from the deep woods your own voice calls back to you, fainter but clear. In that moment, the feeling is not one of physics but of presence. You are not alone. Something has heard you. Something has answered. This is the seed of the entire belief system, a single sensory experience that blossomed into a rich and complex tapestry of folklore. This human tendency to find agency in the world, to see a face in the clouds or a personality in the wind, is a deep and ancient part of us. It is a survival instinct, really. Our brains are hardwired to recognize patterns and, most importantly, to recognize other living things. In a world full of dangers and opportunities, it was always safer to assume that a strange shadow was a predator, or that a rustle in the bushes was a rival, than to dismiss it as nothing. It is better to be startled by 1,000 harmless trees than to be caught unaware by one hidden tiger. And so we looked at the gnarled trunk of a 1,000-year-old camphor tree, and we saw not just wood, but a wise, wrinkled face. We saw the long, sweeping branches of a willow as the flowing hair of a grieving woman. We heard the groan of an oak as the sigh of a sleeping giant. We gave the forest a personality, a soul, because on a deep, instinctual level, we understood that we were in the presence of something far older, more powerful, and more complex than ourselves. We were guests in its home. And so, the Kodama was born from the echo. It grew from a disembodied voice into a fully formed spirit. Its nature was thought to be much like the forest itself, generally peaceful, life-giving and serene, but capable of terrible fury if provoked. A Kodama was not a god to be worshipped from afar in a grand temple, but a neighbor, a very, very old and powerful neighbor whose property lines you crossed with respect. They were seen as the protectors of their chosen trees, and in turn the protectors of the forest itself. To encounter a Kodama was a sign of a healthy, vibrant woodland. Their presence meant the forest was in balance. What did they look like? The stories vary, as all good folklore does. Sometimes they were completely invisible. Their presence felt only as a strange breeze or heard as that inexplicable echo. Other times, they might appear as faint balls of light, like will-o'-the-wisps, floating through the trees at dusk. In other tales, they took on an animal form, perhaps a deer or a fox, something that could melt back into the woods in the blink of an eye. And in more recent imaginings, particularly as our culture sought to give a face to everything, they became small, humanoid figures, sometimes with strange childlike features, their bodies seemingly made of the wood and leaf of the forest itself. But in the oldest tales, their form was less important than their function. Their function was to bear witness, to watch. This belief gave rise to a powerful set of unwritten laws, a form of ecological wisdom passed down not in textbooks but in ghost stories told around the hearth. The central rule was simple: you do not harm a tree that houses a Kodama. To do so was to invite disaster. These stories are found all across Japan, and they often follow a similar chilling pattern. There is the tale of the greedy woodsman, or the arrogant samurai, who needs timber for a new house or a new fortress. He comes across a magnificent, ancient tree, a great Zelkova, or a towering cryptomeria, a tree that the local villagers all know is sacred. They warn him, they tell him a spirit lives within, that to cut it down will bring a curse, but he scoffs at their superstition. He is a man of the modern world, a man of progress and steel. He needs wood, and this is a fine piece of it. He raises his axe, and with the very first strike, something unnatural happens. The stories say that a deep human-like groan echoes from the heart of the wood. Or, more disturbingly, when the axe is pulled away, the cut in the bark does not ooze clear sap. It weeps a thick, dark red liquid that looks for all the world like blood. The tree is bleeding. The man, unnerved but committed, strikes again and again. With every blow, the forest seems to grow darker, the air colder. Finally, with a great shuddering cry that is half the sound of splintering wood and half a human scream, the tree falls. The man has his timber, but the story is not over. The curse of the Kodama begins to unfold, slowly, patiently. Perhaps the man falls ill with a mysterious sickness that no doctor can cure. Perhaps his family suffers, one by one, from accidents and misfortunes. Or maybe the curse is larger. The beams and pillars made from the sacred tree might be found to whisper and cry in the night. filling the new house with a sorrowful presence that drives its inhabitants to madness. In the most dramatic tales, the entire village that allowed the tree to be cut suffers. Their crops fail, their wells run dry, a plague descends. The message of the story is brutally clear. The life of the community was tied to the life of that tree. By killing it, they had severed a vital connection, and now they were paying the price. Is this just superstition? Of course, but it is also something more. It is a perfect, self-enforcing system of conservation. Think of it not as a magical curse, but as a parable for an ecological one. What happens when you cut down the oldest, largest tree in a forest? You destroy a keystone of the ecosystem. That single tree provides a home for countless birds, insects, and mammals. Its vast root system holds the soil together, preventing erosion and landslides. It helps to regulate the local water table, keeping streams flowing and the ground moist. Its canopy creates a unique microclimate that allows delicate ferns and mosses and fungi to thrive. When you remove that tree, you don't just lose the wood. You risk the collapse of the entire intricate system that depended on it. The well might actually run dry. The crops, now exposed to harsh winds and with less stable soil, might actually fail. Sickness might spread more easily in a community weakened by a failing environment. The curse of the Kodama is simply ecology, translated into the language of folklore. It is a story that teaches a profound and scientifically accurate lesson, that some things are more valuable left standing. One of the most famous tales of this kind is that of the Ubazakura, the nurse cherry tree. The story goes that in a certain village there lived a noble family with a young heir. The child's beloved wet nurse, a woman named Yuba, was aging and knew she would not live to see the boy grow to adulthood. At the same time, a favorite cherry tree in the family's garden, one the child loved to play under, was beginning to wither and die. Yuba, in an act of ultimate devotion, prayed that her life might be given to the tree, so that it would continue to blossom and bring joy to the young lord. She died peacefully beneath its branches, and the next spring the tree, which had seemed on the verge of death, burst forth with the most beautiful blossoms the village had ever seen. And it was said that the tree would always bloom on the anniversary of her death, a tribute to her sacrifice. The spirit of the loving nurse had merged with the spirit of the tree. To harm that tree would not just be an act of vandalism, it would be an act of sacrilege against the memory of a selfless soul. The story imbues the tree with a human history, a personality, and a profound emotional weight. It becomes part of the community's own family history. To protect these special trees, to give a physical sign of their sacred status, people began to adorn them. You can still see this all over Japan today. An ancient tree, often a camphor, a cedar, or a ginkgo, standing on the grounds of a shrine or even in the middle of a city park, will have a thick braided rope of rice straw tied around its trunk. This is called a shimenawa. Often white paper streamers called shide are hung from it, zigzagging like stylized lightning bolts. This rope is a boundary marker. It delineates the sacred from the profane. It says, in a clear visual language that everyone understands, that this is not just a tree, this is a shinboku, a divine tree, the home of a spirit. This is a place of worship. The shimenawa is less a decoration and more a divine do not disturb sign. It is a testament to the enduring power of these beliefs, a rope that physically ties the modern world to its ancient animist past. At the base of these trees, you might find a small stone shrine, a hokora, or simply a collection of offerings, a small bottle of sake, a little pile of rice, a few coins. These are not payments or bribes, they are gestures of respect. They are an acknowledgement of the tree's presence and power. It is like leaving a small gift on a neighbor's doorstep. It is a way of maintaining a good relationship, of saying, I see you, I respect you, I am grateful for the shade you provide, for the air you clean, for your silent, steadfast presence in my life. It is a ritual that reinforces the idea of the tree as a living being, a member of the community, not merely a resource to be exploited. And the Kodama were not the only inhabitants of these deep forests. To the Japanese imagination, the woods were a crowded and complex society, a world of spirits known as yokai. This term covers a vast array of supernatural creatures, from mischievous tricksters to dangerous monsters, and many of them called the forests and mountains their home. The forest was not empty space between villages, it was another nation, with its own people and its own rules. To travel through it was to cross a border into their territory. Among the most famous and powerful of these forest yokai are the Tengu, often depicted with a mix of human and avian features, a long nose or a full-on beak, and sometimes a pair of dark wings. The Tengu are the masters and guardians of the mountains. They are ancient, proud, and powerful beings, often associated with martial arts and esoteric knowledge. They live in the deepest parts of the mountains, making their homes in the tallest, oldest pine and cedar trees. A Tengu is not evil, but it is fiercely territorial and easily offended by human arrogance. A swordsman might seek out a Tengu to learn a secret technique, but he would do so with the utmost humility. A woodsman would never dream of cutting down a tree he suspected was the home of a Tengu. The retribution would be swift and terrible. The Tengu, like the Kodama, can be seen as a personification of the forest's power, but a different aspect of it, where the Kodama represents the quiet, life-giving soul of an individual tree. The Tengu represents the wild, untamable, and dangerous spirit of the mountains themselves. They are the sudden, violent storm that can trap a traveler, the disorienting feeling of being lost in an endless sea of trees, the martial discipline required to survive in such a harsh environment. They are the embodiment of the mountain's raw power, a power that demands respect and skill, not just gentle reverence. The stories of Tengu taught people to be prepared, to be humble, and to never underestimate the dangers of the wilderness. Then there are the smaller, more specific spirits, like the Yamabiko. This creature is a more direct and whimsical explanation for the echo phenomenon. Often depicted as a small monkey-like or dog-like creature, the Yamabiko is the spirit that shouts back at you in the mountains. It is the literal agent of the echo. When you shout Yaho into a valley, it is the Yamabiko who hears you and playfully shouts Yaho right back. This transforms a simple physical event into a charming interaction. It populates the world with personality, making even the physics of sound a conversation with a hidden creature. It takes the potentially unnerving experience of hearing your own disembodied voice and turns it into a sign that the mountains are alive and listening. The sheer variety of these forest spirits is staggering, and it speaks to a worldview where every part of the natural world was inhabited and alive. There were spirits of specific passes, of waterfalls, of unique rock formations. There were mischievous spirits that would lead travelers astray, a folkloric explanation for getting lost. There were benevolent spirits that might guide a lost child home. This intricate web of belief created a psychological map that was laid over the physical landscape. A certain dark grove was not just a collection of trees, it was the home of a dangerous spirit, a place to be avoided after dark. A particularly beautiful ancient tree was not just a landmark, it was a sacred being, a place to stop and pay your respects. This way of seeing the world fosters a fundamentally different relationship with nature. The forest is not a resource to be managed, it is a society to be negotiated with. It requires etiquette. It requires you to pay attention. You must learn to read the signs, to understand the rules. You walk with a lighter step. You speak with a quieter voice. You take only what you need and are grateful for it. You are a visitor, and you must act like one. This is a stark contrast to a worldview that sees the natural world as an inert collection of raw materials, there for the taking, to be used and dominated by human will. And this ancient way of seeing has not entirely vanished. It echoes, like the call of the Kodama, into our modern world. It lives on in the reverence shown to the ancient trees that still stand on temple grounds. It lives on in the Shinto belief that kami, or gods, can reside in any natural object of exceptional beauty or power, a waterfall, a mountain, and especially an ancient tree. And it lives on, perhaps most visibly, in our modern storytelling. When you watch a film like Hayao Miyazaki's Princess Mononoke, and you see the little white creatures with their rattling heads, the film explicitly calls them Kodama. They are presented as a sign of the forest's health. When the forest is vibrant and alive, they are numerous. As the forest is destroyed by human industry, they begin to die, and their disappearance is a visual lament for the sickness of the land. This is not just a clever piece of fantasy world building. This is Miyazaki tapping into that deep, ancient cultural vein, taking the folklore of his ancestors and using it to tell a powerful modern ecological fable. He is reminding us that the concept of the forest having a soul, a spirit that suffers when it is wounded, is not a childish fantasy, but a profound and essential truth. The whispers in the wood, then, are not just the stuff of forgotten folklore. They are the remnants of a language we once all spoke. a language of deep connection to the living world. The stories of the Kodama, the Tengu, and the other yokai are more than just charming fairy tales. They are a library of accumulated wisdom, a user's manual for living in harmony with an environment that was seen not as a thing, but as a community of beings. They teach a lesson that we are perhaps just now beginning to relearn in the language of science, that the world is a single interconnected web, and to break one strand is to risk unraveling the whole. So as we settle deeper into the quiet of this moment, let's listen again. Listen past the wind. Listen past the gentle creak of branches. Can you hear it? That faint, distant echo. That feeling of a quiet, patient presence. It is the whisper of the Kodama, a voice from the heart of the ancient wood, reminding us that we are part of something vast and old and beautiful. A world that is very much alive and has been waiting silently, patiently, for us to remember how to listen. The folklore is not the story of what is unreal. It is the story of how generations of people made sense of what is profoundly, deeply real, our absolute dependence on, and our sacred connection to the great green breathing world. Chapter 3. The Unmoving Witness. Sacred trees as the heart of Japanese society. And perhaps nowhere is that connection more tangible, more profoundly real, than in the role of the single great tree that so often stands at the very center of a community. We move now from the whispers of the Kodama in the sprawling wild forest to the steady, silent presence of the Shinboku, the sacred tree, as it stands not in the wilderness, but at the heart of the village. For these trees were not merely objects of distant reverence, they were the central pillar around which society itself was built. They were the unmoving witness to the entire span of a community's existence, their roots intertwined not just with the soil but with the very history, law, and identity of the people who lived in their shade. The folklore, the stories of spirits and gods, gave the tree its soul, but it was the daily life of the village that gave the tree its purpose. Let's imagine for a moment a world without street signs or satellite maps, a world where the landscape is read not by lines on a page, but by the shapes of hills, the curves of a river, and the towering presence of living landmarks. In ancient Japan, before the age of precise cartography, the great tree was the ultimate point of reference. It was a navigational star brought down to earth, a quiet green anchor in a shifting world. A traveler, lost in the rolling hills, would search the horizon not for a steeple, but for the familiar broad crown of the village Camphor, or the soaring spire of the sacred cedar. Its silhouette was a promise of home, of water, of community. This was not a casual or accidental arrangement. The very placement of a village was often decided in relation to a magnificent, pre-existing tree. To found a community was to choose a guardian, and what better guardian than one that had already stood on that patch of earth for centuries. This tree would become the literal and figurative center. Village boundaries were not marked by fences or stones alone, they were understood in relation to the tree. Our land extends from the Great Zelkova to the bend in the river, one might say. The tree was the unarguable starting point, the zero marker from which the entire world of the village was measured. Its presence was a constant, multi-sensory experience. On a hot summer day, its shade was a gift, a communal refuge where the temperature dropped and the air felt cooler, softer. The sound of the wind moving through its thousands upon thousands of leaves was the village's own unique whisper, a sound so familiar that its absence on a still day would feel strange, like a held breath. For many species, like the mighty Cinnamomum camphora, the camphor tree, there was also a scent, a clean, sharp medicinal aroma that would drift on the breeze, a constant reminder of the tree's living presence. It was the smell of home. This was a landmark that was not just seen, but felt, heard, and smelled. It imprinted itself upon the memory of every child who grew up playing at its base. This role as a physical anchor was deeply intertwined with the Shinto belief in the kami residing within. The tree wasn't just a useful marker, it was the sacred center from which the village's spiritual protection radiated. To be within sight of the tree was to be under its watch, within the realm of the local deity. This made the boundary it defined more than just a line on the land. It was the edge of a spiritual safe harbor. To leave the sight of the tree was, in a very real sense, to venture out into the unknown world, beyond the immediate care of the village god. Think of the great camphor of Takeo, a tree that is said to be over 3,000 years old, standing beside the Takeo shrine in Saga Prefecture. Its base is a colossal gnarled universe of roots and bark, a single organism the size of a building. Today, we visit it as a natural wonder, but for centuries, for millennia, it was the world for the people there. It didn't just stand next to the shrine is there because of the tree. The tree came first. It was the original sacred space, the original cathedral of nature, and the human-built structures were placed in its presence as a sign of respect for all the generations that lived and died in its shadow. Its sheer, unmoving permanence was a source of profound stability. Emperors rose and fell, wars swept across the land, but the great Camphor remained, its leaves catching the same morning sun, its shadow tracing the same slow arc across the ground. It was the ultimate constant in a world of change. From this role as a physical anchor, the sacred tree naturally grew into its next great purpose, that of the social heart of the community. If the tree was the center of the village's geography, it was also the center of its human drama. Underneath its vast spreading branches was the original public square, the open-air meeting hall, and nature's own courthouse. Picture a gathering of village elders, their faces etched with the lines of seasons and experience, sitting on woven mats at the base of the Shinboku. The dappled sunlight filters through the canopy, creating a moving mosaic on the ground. The immense trunk, broad and textured as a cliff face, stands behind them like a silent, impartial judge. Here, in this sacred space, the most important decisions for the community were made. Discussions about planting and harvest, the allocation of water rights from the local stream, arrangements for marriages, and the resolution of disputes all took place in the presence of the tree. There is a deep and beautiful logic to this. In a society without formal stone-built courthouses, the sacred tree provided the ideal setting. It was a neutral space, belonging to everyone and no one, save the kami within. Its sheer age and scale lent a profound gravity to the proceedings. To tell a lie under the gaze of a human official might be one thing. To tell a lie in the shade of a 1,000-year-old being, in the sacred space of the village god, was to risk a much deeper spiritual kind of retribution. The tree was the witness that could not be deceived, the one who had seen the ancestors of everyone present make their own promises and pleas. Oaths sworn beneath its branches carried an almost unbreakable weight. This was not a passive role. The tree was an active participant in the social fabric. Its physical form created the space. The enormous canopy was a natural roof, protecting from sun and light rain. The rustle of its leaves provided a kind of acoustic privacy, muffling conversations from those further away, while creating a focused, yet natural environment for those gathered beneath. It was a space that felt both public and intimate at the same time. The community's bulletin board was often the tree itself, with messages or decrees posted upon its trunk. It was the place you went to learn the news, to hear the gossip, to be part of the collective life of the village. It was a place of law, but also a place of grace. Imagine a dispute between two farmers over the boundary of a rice paddy. Instead of a sterile courtroom, they are brought before the elders under the great tree. The air is alive. The tree breathes around them. The scale of their argument, which felt so large and all-consuming, is suddenly put into perspective by the ancient, living column beside them. The tree's time scale is not measured in harvests, but in centuries. It has witnessed 100 such disputes, 100 such resolutions. Its silent presence encourages a longer view, a more harmonious solution. It is a setting that fosters reconciliation over retribution. This function as a social hub also meant it was the center for education, in the broadest sense. It was here that stories were told. Grandmothers would sit with the village children, their small hands tracing the patterns on the gnarled bark as they listened to the old tales, the myths of the gods, the legends of the village's founding, the heroic deeds of their ancestors. The tree itself was often the main character in these stories. History, morality, and culture were passed down not in a classroom, but in the living presence of the subject itself. The tree wasn't just a witness to history, it was the primary tool for teaching it. It was the living library, its bark the cover of a book whose pages were the countless human lives that had unfolded beneath it. As the seasons turned, the tree's role would shift once more, from the daily and the judicial to the cyclical and the celebratory. The Shinboku was the village's clock and calendar, a living oracle of the changing seasons. For an agricultural society, this was not a matter of romance, but of survival. The first budding of its leaves in spring was a more reliable sign to begin planting than any date on a calendar. The specific timing of its flowering could signal the arrival of certain insects, both pests and pollinators. The turning of its leaves to gold and crimson in the autumn was the signal for the final harvest, the time to prepare for the coming winter. The tree was a partner in the great dance of agriculture, its biological rhythms deeply synchronized with the life of the community. And because its life cycle was so intimately tied to the fortunes of the village, it naturally became the focal point for the most important community gatherings, the festivals, or matsuri. These festivals were, and still are, the vibrant heartbeats of Japanese community life, moments when the sacred and the secular merge in a joyous celebration, and at the center of it all, invariably, is the sacred tree. Let's picture the scene. The village is preparing for the spring planting festival. The air is filled with anticipation. The great tree, which has stood as a stoic, silent guardian all winter, is now the guest of honor at a grand party. Its trunk is adorned with a newly woven shimenawa, a thick rope of rice straw. The rope itself is a work of art, thick and heavy, with white paper streamers called shide folded into precise lightning bolt shapes, fluttering in the breeze. This rope is not merely decoration, it is a powerful symbol, a visible demarcation that separates the sacred space of the kami from the ordinary world. It is the community's way of saying, "We see you, we honor you, we are here to ask for your blessing." Offerings are brought and placed at its base, mounds of perfect polished rice, bottles of sake, glistening fruits, and fresh vegetables from the first small harvests. These are not just symbolic gestures, they are a sharing of the community's wealth, a gift of the very best they have, given back to the source of life and abundance. The village priest in his formal robes will stand before the tree and chant prayers, his voice a low, melodic hum that seems to resonate with the ancient wood itself. He speaks to the kami, thanking it for its protection and asking for its favor in the coming season, for timely rains, for abundant sunshine, for a harvest that will sustain them all. Then, as evening falls, the mood shifts. Paper lanterns are hung from the lower branches, their soft, warm glow transforming the space into a magical, otherworldly ballroom. The sounds of drums, the deep, resonant beat of the taiko, begin to echo through the village, a rhythm that you feel in your chest. Flutes trill a high, sharp melody over the top. People gather, dressed in their finest clothes. There is laughter, food and drink. Children chase each other around the massive trunk, their hands sticky with sweets. Young couples steal quiet moments in the shadows. It is a moment of pure, unadulterated community cohesion. All of these activities, the sacred prayers and the joyful celebration, happen in the presence of the tree. The tree is the silent host, the anchor that holds the entire festival together. It links the people not only to their god, but to each other. By celebrating together under its branches, they reaffirm their shared identity, their mutual dependence, and their collective history. And they are also connecting with their ancestors. They are standing in the same spot, looking at the same tree, perhaps singing the same songs that their grandparents and great-grandparents did during this very same festival, generations before. The Matsuri collapses time, and the tree is the portal through which this connection is made. This sense of connection across generations brings us to the most profound role of the sacred tree, that of the unmoving witness, the silent historian. A human life is so fleeting. We live for a handful of decades, and then we are gone. Our memories are imperfect, and with our passing, our direct experience of the world vanishes. A community's memory is therefore a fragile thing, a chain of stories passed from one generation to the next. But the tree remembers differently. Its memory is not written in words, but in wood. Deep within its trunk, hidden from our eyes, is a perfect, unbroken record of its life, and by extension, the life of the village. Each concentric ring is a chronicle of a single year. A wide ring tells of a good year, with plentiful rain and sun, a year of abundance for the village. A narrow, constricted ring tells of a drought, a long, harsh winter, or a devastating insect plague, a year of struggle and hardship. A scar deep in the wood might be the silent testament to a great fire or a typhoon that swept through the village centuries ago. The tree is the village's diary, a biological archive keeping a faithful account of the passage of time. To call the tree old is a polite understatement. It is a being that operates on a completely different timescale from our own. A human lifetime is but a season to it. It has felt the sun of 1,000 summers and borne the weight of 1,000 winters. When a child is born in the village, the tree is there. It watches that child learn to walk, play games in its shade, fall in love, grow old, and become an ancestor. and then it watches that person's grandchildren do the same. It has witnessed every wedding, every funeral, every birth, every departure. It has stood through periods of peace and prosperity, and it has stood through famine, plague, and war. Its branches have offered shelter to villagers fleeing from samurai conflicts. Its leaves have rustled in the silence of a village emptied by illness. It holds all of this history within itself, a quiet, non-judgmental observer to the entire sprawling epic of a people. There is an incredible comfort in this. In a world that can feel chaotic and impermanent, the Shinboku offers a profound sense of continuity. To stand before it, to place your hand on its rough, ancient bark, is to physically connect with your own history. You are touching the same surface that your ancestors touched. You are standing on the same ground where they made the decisions that allowed you to be here. You are for a moment outside of the frantic rush of your own short life, and you are part of something vast, slow, and enduring. It's humbling, really. All our urgent modern anxieties seem to shrink in the presence of such deep, patient time. This living connection to the past is what makes the potential loss of such a tree so devastating to a community, a wound that is far deeper than the simple loss of a landmark. It is an act of communal memory loss, a burning of the library. It is why these trees were and are so fiercely protected. They are not just wood and leaves, they are the vessel of the community's soul. They are the keepers of the covenant between the generations, the silent promise that the story of the village will continue. So when we look at these colossal sacred trees, we are seeing so much more than a botanical specimen. We are seeing a living monument that served as a map, a courthouse, a community center, a calendar, and a library. It was the heart of the village, its roots drawing sustenance from the earth, while its branches held the community together. It was the unmoving witness, the one constant in the long unfolding story of human life. It didn't need to speak, for its very presence told the most important story of all, that of endurance, of community, of memory, and of the sacred, unbreakable bond between a people and the place they call home. It stands as a quiet, powerful reminder that the deepest roots of any society are not in its laws or its buildings, but in its connection to the living, breathing world. Chapter 4. The Camphor Colossus. In search of the Deku Tree in Kyushu. And so, to truly understand this connection to the living, breathing world, we must travel. We must leave the familiar behind and journey to where this bond is at its most ancient, its most profound. We are going south, letting the main islands of Japan recede behind us like a fading memory, crossing the straits to a different kind of land, an island forged in fire and draped in a deeper, more humid green. We are going to Kyushu. Kyushu is a place of primal forces. The ground here is alive, breathing steam from geothermal vents, its mountains still dusted with the ash of recent volcanic fury. It is a landscape that feels older, wilder, and it is here, in this fertile, geologically restless earth, that the true giants dwell. The air itself feels different, thicker, warmer, carrying the scent of the sea and damp, rich soil. This is the kingdom of the Kyushu, the Camphor tree, and we are here on a pilgrimage in search of the one that might just be the living heart of Hyrule. Our journey takes us away from the sprawling cities deep into the countryside, following winding roads that hug the contours of the volcanic hills. The forests here press in on all sides, a dense tapestry of bamboo and cedar, but as we draw closer to our destination, we begin to see them. At first, they are just larger trees, ancient sentinels standing in groves or marking the entrance to a small village. But they are different. Their canopies are broader, their bark more gnarled, their presence more commanding. These are the elder statesmen of the forest, and they are merely the precursors, the honor guard for the king we have come to see. We arrive in the town of Kamui, a quiet place nestled in the Era Caldera. The town itself feels like it lives in deference to something far older than its own streets and houses. And there, at its heart, is the Kamui Hashiman Shrine. Like so many sacred sites in Japan, it does not announce itself with grand architecture, but with a quiet, dignified humility. We pass under the simple stone torii gate, the traditional marker that separates the mundane world from the sacred space within. The air instantly changes. The sounds of the town fall away, replaced by the crunch of gravel underfoot and the gentle, persistent buzz of cicadas. The light becomes softer, filtered through a high, dense canopy, and then we feel it before we truly see it. A presence, a weight in the atmosphere, a stillness that is so absolute it feels like a sound. We round a small stone lantern, and the path opens up, and there it is. To say you see the great Camphor of Camus is an understatement. You don't just see it, you experience it, you are confronted by it. The human mind, so accustomed to measuring the world in familiar units, the height of a door, the width of a road, simply stops. It has no frame of reference for this. This is not a tree. This is a geological event that happens to be alive. It is estimated to be over 1,500 years old. A sapling when the Roman Empire was collapsing. It has stood on this spot, in this volcanic caldera, through typhoons, earthquakes, wars, and the entire recorded history of the nation that grew up around it. Let's just be still for a moment, and try to take it in. Look up. The canopy is so vast, so dense, it creates its own sky. It is a sprawling leafy continent, held aloft by branches thicker than the trunks of most other ancient trees. Sunlight struggles to find a way through, and when it does, it arrives not as harsh glare but as soft, dappled shafts of emerald light, painting moving patterns on the ground below. The air beneath this canopy is cool and still, a pocket of ancient atmosphere preserved under the great green dome. The tree creates its own weather, its own ecosystem, its own self-contained world. Now, let your eyes travel down the branches. They are not smooth, elegant limbs reaching for the sky. They are gnarled, twisted, colossal things, heavy with their own immense age. They look less like wood and more like weathered stone, like the arms of a mountain god. They are draped in life. Entire gardens of ferns, mosses, and orchids cling to their surfaces, creating what botanists call an epiphyte community, but what looks to us like a series of hanging terraced gardens. These aren't parasites, they are tenants, guests living on the broad, sturdy surfaces of their host, drawing moisture and nutrients from the air and the rain. Each branch is its own biome, a world teeming with insects, spiders, and the birds that come to hunt them. A creature could be born in the upper reaches of this canopy, live its entire life, and die there, never needing to touch the ground far below. And then, your gaze finally reaches the trunk. It is less a trunk, and more a fortress wall. Its circumference is over 24 meters. It would take more than a dozen people holding hands to encircle it. The bark is a landscape in itself, a tapestry of deep fissures and smooth silvery patches. It is a roadmap of time, with every crack and bulge telling the story of a season, a storm, a century of slow, quiet growth. In the deep valleys of the bark, mosses grow in vibrant green cushions, and lichens paint abstract patterns in shades of grey and white. You could spend a lifetime studying the surface of this trunk and never uncover all of its secrets. Circling its base, we see the roots. The Japanese have a word for this, nibari. It refers to the magnificent surface roots that spread out from the base of an ancient tree, gripping the earth. But here, the word feels inadequate. These are not roots. These are buttresses, great organic walls of wood that flow out from the trunk and meld with the ground. They are like the petrified muscles of a sleeping giant, holding the colossal weight of the tree and anchoring it to the very bedrock of the island. They create caves and hollows at the base, dark little grottos where small things can hide, and where the damp smell of earth and decay is strongest. You feel an instinctual understanding that this tree is not merely on the land, it is part of the land. It holds the soil together, a living linchpin for the entire shrine. And wrapped around this magnificent trunk, about halfway up, is a thick, braided rope of rice straw, a shimenawa. From it hang white, lightning bolt-shaped paper streamers called shide. This is not a decoration. This is a sign, a boundary. It marks the tree as a shinboku, a sacred tree, and more than that, a yorishiro, an object capable of attracting and housing a kami, a divine spirit. The rope is a quiet, powerful declaration. This is not just a plant. This is an abode of the gods. Step lightly. Speak softly. You are in the presence of something holy. The most striking feature, the one that resonates so deeply with the myths of Hyrule, is the opening. On one side of the trunk is a vast, dark hollow, an uro. It is a natural doorway, 10 times the size of a person, leading into the heart of the ancient being. It is not a wound, not really. It is a feature of its immense age. Standing at the threshold, you can feel a gentle exhalation of cool, damp air, and the smell. It is the first thing that truly defines the camphor tree. It is a clean, sharp, medicinal scent. It is aromatic, almost like mint or eucalyptus, but with a deeper woody resonance. This is the smell of camphor itself, the crystalline compound that the tree produces in its tissues. It is the tree's own personal chemistry set, its defense mechanism. The scent we find so pleasant and purifying is a potent insect repellent and a powerful fungicide. It is one of the secrets to the tree's longevity. While other trees might succumb to rot and infestation, the camphor actively fights back. It is a master chemist, brewing its own preservative, ensuring its own survival through a quiet, invisible form of chemical warfare. Let's step inside. The world outside vanishes. The light changes completely, from the soft green of the canopy to a deep, earthy brown. The sound is muffled. It is like stepping into a wooden cathedral. The interior space is immense, easily large enough to hold a small house. The walls are not smooth, but a chaotic sculpture of decaying heartwood. Here you can see the biology of the tree laid bare. A tree is not a solid object in the way a stone is. It is in essence a living cylinder. The outermost layers, the bark, the phloem, the cambium, and the sapwood, are where life happens. This is the tree's circulatory system, its skin, its growth engine. The sapwood is a network of microscopic pipes, drawing water and nutrients up from the roots to the leaves, a journey of hundreds of feet against the pull of gravity. The phloem, just under the bark, is another set of pipes, carrying the sugars created by photosynthesis in the leaves back down to feed the rest of the tree. It's a miraculous, two-way plumbing system that keeps the entire massive organism alive. But the very core of the tree, the heartwood, is technically not alive. It is composed of dead cells that have been filled with resins and other chemical compounds like camphor that make it strong and resistant to decay. It is the tree's structural support, its internal skeleton. In a younger tree, this core is solid, but in a tree of this immense age, a different process begins. Over centuries, fungi and bacteria, the great recyclers of the forest, find a way in, perhaps through a broken branch or a crack in the bark. They begin the slow, patient work of decomposition, but they can only work on the dead heartwood. The camphor oils slow them down, but time is on their side. Over hundreds of years, they hollow out the inside of the tree. From the outside, this might look like a sign of weakness, of death. But for the tree, it is a brilliant strategy for survival. By shedding the immense weight of its solid core, the tree becomes more stable, less likely to topple in a typhoon. It conserves resources, no longer needing to maintain that massive, non-living internal structure. It becomes a living shell, a great sturdy cylinder of life, stronger and more resilient for its emptiness. The hollow is not a sign of decay. It is a sign of adaptation, of ancient wisdom. It has let go of its own past to better survive in the present. Looking up from inside the hollow, you can sometimes see a sliver of the sky, far, far above. The walls around you are a testament to this process. They are pocketed and gnarled, smoothed by time and moisture. In some places, the wood is dark and damp. In others, it's dry and crumbling to the touch. The air is thick with the scent of camphor and rich, dark earth. It feels like being inside the earth itself, a secret chamber held within a living mountain. And it is this space, this sacred hollowed-out heart, that feels so familiar. This is the entrance to the Great Deku Tree. It is a threshold between the outer world and an inner sanctum, a place of wisdom and secrets. The game designers who imagined a great guardian tree with a doorway in its trunk were not inventing a fantasy from whole cloth. They were tapping into a deep archetypal image that exists right here, in the real world. They were remembering places like this. Imagine being a child, growing up in this town. This tree would not just be a part of the landscape, it would be a character in your life, a silent, benevolent grandparent who has watched over your family for generations, a place of shade in the summer, a landmark to guide you home. The shrine at its base would be the center of community life, the place of festivals and prayers. The tree itself would be the ultimate guardian, its vast presence a source of comfort and stability in a world that is always changing. Its hollow would be a place of mystery and imagination, a gateway to other worlds, just waiting for a hero in a green tunic to step inside. Let's trace the connections more directly. The sheer, overwhelming scale is the first and most obvious link. The Great Deku Tree is always portrayed as a colossal being, far larger than any other tree in the forest, so large that it functions as a landmark and a destination in itself. Standing here beneath the great camphor of Camus, that feeling is perfectly replicated. It recalibrates your sense of what is possible in the biological world. Then there is the form. The sprawling, gnarled roots that seem to melt into the earth are a signature of the Deku Tree, giving it a sense of immense stability and age. Look at the Nibari here, these wooden pythons gripping the soil. They are not just functional, they are expressive. They speak of a long, slow, powerful life. The canopy, too. The Deku Tree's leaves often create a protective, sheltering space, a clearing in the forest that feels separate and sacred. Here the real tree does exactly that. The world under its branches is a distinct place, with its own light, its own temperature, its own acoustics. It is a natural temple, and the shrine built here is simply a formal recognition of the sacredness that the tree itself creates. And of course the hollow. In every iteration of the legend, the Deku Tree has an accessible interior. It is not just a tree, it is a location, a dungeon, a sanctuary, a place you can enter. This great Camphor provides that exact experience. It is a living building, an organic piece of architecture that invites you in. The fantasy of a tree you can walk inside of is made real here. You can stand within its very heart and look out at the world, sheltered by 1,500 years of slow, patient growth. There is another, more subtle parallel. The Great Deku Tree is often a source of life. It gives birth to the Kokiri, its seeds are items of power, and its very presence sustains the forest. The Great Camphor of Kamu is also a profound source of life, not in a magical way, but in a real, biological sense. Think again of the ecosystem in its canopy, the hundreds of species of plants, insects and animals that depend on it for their existence. It is a biodiversity hotspot all on its own, a vertical forest island. It gives and sustains life for a multitude of beings. It is, in every meaningful way, a world tree. And what of the face? The Great Deku Tree is often given a wise, grandfatherly face in its bark. Standing here, let your eyes relax and just gaze at the trunk. The human brain is a pattern-seeking machine. In the chaotic, beautiful mess of bark, fissures and burls, faces seem to emerge and then fade away. A wise old eye here, a grimacing mouth there. This phenomenon, pareidolia, is our own mind trying to connect, trying to find a relatable consciousness in this immense alien life form. The game designers simply made that impulse literal. They took the face we instinctively search for in the bark of ancient trees and carved it into their creation, giving it a voice and a personality. But the feeling, the desire to see a mind within the wood, begins here. The cultural significance of the camphor tree in Japan cannot be overstated, and it adds another layer to this connection. Camphor wood, with its beautiful grain and aromatic pest-repellent qualities, has been prized for centuries. It was used to build ships, to create fine furniture, and to carve statues for temples. The compound itself was refined into crystals and used as a medicine, a perfume, and most famously, as the key ingredient in mothballs. There is a long history of a practical, economic relationship between humans and this tree. But alongside this practical use runs a deeper, spiritual reverence. The biggest, oldest trees were never cut down. They were recognized as special. They were left to stand as markers of sacred ground. They became intertwined with the Shinto belief that divinity can inhabit all things in nature. This tree is not merely a resource, it is a respected elder, a lord, a god. The Deku Tree holds a similar dual role in its world. It is a guardian and a spiritual center, but it is also a physical part of the world that Link interacts with, a place with a purpose within the story's economy. Let's rest here for a while. At the base of this giant, find a spot on the exposed roots, worn smooth by centuries of visitors. Lean back against the ancient bark, feel its solidity, its quiet, unwavering strength. Listen. Listen past the cicadas. You might hear the gentle creak of a colossal branch, shifting its weight in the breeze, a sound like a great ship groaning at sea. You might hear the scuttling of a lizard in the undergrowth, or the flutter of a bird's wings high above in the hidden world of the canopy. There is a peace here that is profound. It is the peace of deep time. All our human anxieties, our deadlines, our worries, they seem so small, so fleeting in the face of a being that has stood here for a millennium and a half. It has witnessed the entire arc of modern civilization from this single spot. It is a living bridge to a past so distant we can barely comprehend it. It doesn't need to speak to impart its wisdom. Its very existence is the lesson, a lesson in patience. Growth is not measured in days or years, but in centuries, a lesson in resilience. It has endured everything the world could throw at it, and has turned its own decay into a strategy for survival, and a lesson in community. It is not a solitary being but a host to a vibrant world of life, a foundation upon which countless other stories unfold. This, then, is the overwhelming feeling you take away from the Great Camphor of Camus. Not just that it looks like the Great Deku Tree, but that it feels like it. It embodies the same spirit, an ancient, benevolent, life-giving guardian. A being that is so intertwined with the land, the people, and the divine that it becomes something more than a tree. It becomes a living myth, a quiet, powerful reminder that the most incredible fantasies are often just echoes of the magic that already exists in our own world, waiting patiently in a quiet shrine for us to come and find it. As we finally turn to leave, to step back through the Torii Gate into the ordinary world, the cool air and the sharp, clean scent of camphor seem to follow us, a lingering memory of the time we spent in the presence of a giant. Chapter 5: The Forest Primeval, the ancient cedars of Yakushima. That scent, that clean, almost medicinal sharpness of camphor, it lingers in the mind long after we've passed back through the sacred gate. It's the memory of a single colossal life, a being rooted in one place, absorbing the prayers and seasons of a community, becoming a living monument. But what if that sense of profound, living sanctity wasn't contained within a single courtyard, surrounded by rope and paper prayers? What if it wasn't a single tree, but an entire world? What if the temple wasn't built around the sacred life, but was in fact the sacred life itself? To find that, we must travel south. We leave the world of quiet shrines and manicured temple grounds behind. We must take a boat, or a small plane, and aim for a speck in the ocean south of Japan's main islands, a place where the mountains rise so sharply from the sea that they seem to tear the clouds from the sky. Our journey takes us to an island that feels like a myth made real, Yakushima. Even from the coast, you can feel that this place operates under a different set of rules. The air is heavy with moisture, thick and tangible. A perpetual mist clings to the peaks, and the color green seems to exist here in 1,000 shades you never knew were possible. There is a local saying that it rains on Yakushima for 35 days a month, and while that's a gentle exaggeration, it speaks to a profound truth. The island is a rain-making machine. As the warm, wet ocean winds hit the steep granite mountains, they are forced upwards, cooling and condensing into an almost constant downpour. It is a world born of water, and defined by it. This is the real-world lost woods, the inspiration for the deep, ancient, and often dangerous forests of folklore and fantasy. When you step from the path and into the trees here, you are stepping into a world that feels as old as time itself, because in many ways it is. This is a primeval forest, a remnant of the temperate rainforest that once covered much of this part of the world, and it is home to its kings, its gods, the Yakusugi. The word sugi simply means cedar in Japanese, specifically Cryptomeria japonica. But on this island, when you add the word yaku, it transforms. A yakusugi is not just any cedar. It is a title, an honorific, bestowed only upon the ancient ones who have lived here for more than 1,000 years. And as we begin our ascent into the mountains, following trails that are more root than soil, we begin to understand why they are revered, not as trees, but as living deities. The first thing you notice is the sound, or rather the lack of it. The ground, the rocks, the fallen logs, the very trunks of the trees themselves are carpeted in a thick, velvety layer of moss. It is a living green blanket that muffles every footstep, that drinks the constant rain and absorbs all sound, creating a profound cathedral-like silence. The only noise is the gentle rhythmic dripping of water from leaf to moss and the distant constant whisper of a mountain stream. It is the sound of the world breathing. And the air, it is so clean, so pure, it feels like the first breath you've ever taken. It's a mixture of damp earth, decaying wood, and the sharp resinous perfume of the cedars. This resin is the secret to their longevity. The Yakusugi grow on nutrient-poor granite, a brutal environment that forces them to grow with an almost unimaginable slowness. A sapling might only grow a millimeter in a year. This slow, arduous life packs its wood with an incredible density and an enormous amount of resin. This resin is its lifeblood, its armor, its embalming fluid. It makes the wood nearly impervious to rot, to insects, to the relentless damp that would turn any lesser tree to mulch in a matter of decades. So they endure, not by growing tall and straight and proud, like the cedars of a managed forest. No, these trees are survivors, and they look the part. They are gnarled, twisted, contorted things. Their trunks are often hollowed out by centuries of typhoons and lightning strikes, yet they continue to live, their vital tissues clinging to the outer edges of their ruined husks. They are not beautiful in the way a cherry blossom is beautiful. They are beautiful in the way a mountain range is beautiful. They are monuments to endurance, their bark like the wrinkled skin of an ancient elephant, their branches reaching out like the arthritic hands of a sleeping giant. Each one is a sculpture carved not by a human artist, but by millennia of wind and rain and struggle. We are walking now on a path laid centuries ago during Japan's Edo period, a trail made of carefully placed stones and logs, now slick with moss. It's called the Arakawa Trail. It follows an old logging railway line, a faint scar of a more industrial time, which has now been almost completely reclaimed by the forest. The rusting tracks seem like the bones of some long-dead beast, a quiet reminder that nature here is patient, it will always win in the end. As we walk deeper, we begin to meet them. The younger Yakusugi, the ones that are merely 1,000 or 1,500 years old. We pass a pair of trees known as the Myoto Sugi, the husband and wife cedars, whose branches have intertwined high above as if in a permanent embrace. We see trees growing not from the soil, but from the immense moss-covered corpse of a fallen predecessor, a phenomenon called stump regeneration. The death of one ancient giant provides the nursery for the next generation, a perfect quiet cycle of life and death playing out over a timescale we can barely comprehend. Then, we come to a place that stops us in our tracks. It is a clearing of sorts, dominated by the most colossal tree stump you have ever seen. It is hollow, a vast wooden cave, large enough for a dozen people to stand inside comfortably. This is Wilson's Stump, named for the Harvard botanist Ernest Henry Wilson, who documented it in the early 20th century. This is the remnant of a truly gargantuan Yakusugi that was cut down some 400 years ago. To step inside is to enter the heart of a fallen god. Looking up from the inside, through the hollow where its core used to be, you see a perfect heart-shaped window to the sky. Water drips down the ancient resin-impregnated walls. You can run your hands over the wood that was alive when Shakespeare was writing his plays, and feel its unyielding strength. It is a tomb, but it is also a testament. Even in death, even after 4 centuries, it has refused to rot. It is too full of its own life force, and from its surface, new life, mosses, ferns, even small trees is sprouting. It has become a new world unto itself. This is just a prelude. Wilson's Stump, as magnificent as it is, was just one of the king's retainers. The true sovereign of this forest is still hours away. Deeper and higher into the mountain's embrace, the path becomes steeper, more challenging. We climb over massive roots that look like the sinews of the earth itself. We cross crystal-clear streams on swaying rope bridges, the water so pure you feel you could drink it straight from the source. The air grows cooler, thinner. The mist thickens around us, shrouding the world in a soft grey light. The shapes of the trees become more fantastical, more ancient. We are entering the inner sanctum. And then, after a final lung-testing climb, the path opens onto a small wooden viewing platform. And there it is, Jomon Sugi. All words fail, all sense of scale evaporates. It is not a tree, it is a presence. It is a geological event that happens to be alive. Its trunk is a bulging, bubbling, gnarled mass of wood and bark, so immense that it seems less like a tree trunk and more like a small mountain. It has a girth of over 16 meters. It doesn't soar, it squats, a being of immense power and gravity, holding the entire forest in its thrall. Its surface is a universe of its own. Canyons of bark, continents of moss, waterfalls of lichen. Other trees, rowans and rhododendrons, have taken root in the crooks of its ancient shattered limbs, creating a hanging garden 50 feet in the air. It is a living ecosystem, an island of life, supporting a world of its own. But what truly humbles you, what forces the air from your lungs and brings a quiet reverence to your heart, is its age. No one knows for sure. The tree is largely hollow, making a true ring count impossible. Scientific estimates range from a conservative 2,170 years to a staggering 7,200 years old. Let's just take a moment to consider that. If it is at the younger end of that scale, this tree was a sapling when the Roman Republic was founded, when Cleopatra ruled Egypt. It was already ancient when the first samurai pledged his loyalty to his lord. If it is at the older end, then this living being was already a mature tree when the first stones of Stonehenge were being raised. It was a giant before the Great Pyramids of Giza were built. It sprouted from a seed during the Jomon period of Japanese prehistory, a time of hunter-gatherers and the very first pottery, hence its name. It has stood on this mountainside through ice ages and warming periods. It has weathered 10,000 typhoons. It has watched civilizations rise and fall like the turning of the seasons. Our own lives, our worries, our triumphs, they are like the falling of a single leaf in its millennia-long autumn. To stand in its presence is to be given the profound gift of perspective. It is a creature of deep time, a living bridge to a world we can only read about in history books. Its sacredness is not bestowed by humans. There is no shrine rope tied around it, no paper prayers fluttering from its branches. It needs no such recognition. Its sanctity is inherent. It is sacred because it has survived. It is a deity of endurance, a god of time itself. The viewing platform we stand on was built not for our convenience, but for the tree's protection, to keep the thousands of visiting feet from compacting the soil around its delicate, ancient roots. We are the guests here. We are pilgrims visiting a being far greater and older than ourselves. And looking at this impossibly ancient life form, you start to see the forest differently. You realize it's not a collection of individual trees competing for sunlight. The scientists who study this forest speak of the vast, intricate network of mycelium in the soil, the fungal threads that connect the roots of every tree. It is a subterranean internet, a biological network that allows the trees to communicate, to share nutrients and water and information. The older, larger trees, the mother trees, can send resources to struggling saplings. They can warn each other of insect attacks. The forest is not a collection of individuals. It is a single, sprawling, interconnected consciousness, a superorganism. And Jomon Sugi, it is the heart of that organism. It is the great elder, the central node, the living library holding the genetic memory of its kind. A history written not in ink, but in rings of wood and molecules of resin. It's here, in the profound, misty silence of Yakushima, surrounded by a life that precedes human memory, that you understand the feeling Hayao Miyazaki infused into his films like Princess Mononoke, the forest spirit, the Kodama, the sense of a wilderness that is intelligent, ancient, and powerful, that is not fantasy. It is a translation of a feeling. It is the feeling of standing right here, at the foot of Jomon Sugi. It is the feeling of realizing that we are not masters of this world, but simply one small, fleeting part of it. As we finally turn to leave, to begin the long journey back down the mountain, we don't feel tired. We feel quieted, humbled. The mist seems to follow us, clinging to our clothes and hair, and the clean, sharp scent of cedar feels like it has soaked into our very being. We are leaving the presence of a king, leaving a cathedral made not of stone and glass, but of wood and moss and time. And you carry a piece of that silence with you, a quiet, powerful reminder that the oldest stories are not told in books, but are whispered by the wind in the leaves of a forest that has been waiting patiently for us to come and listen. Chapter 6. Echoes in Hyrule. From Shinto Grove to Digital Guardian. The mist seems to follow us, clinging to our clothes and hair, and the clean, sharp scent of cedar feels like it has soaked into our very being. We are leaving the presence of a king, leaving a cathedral made not of stone and glass, but of wood and moss and time, and you carry a piece of that silence with you, a quiet, powerful reminder that the oldest stories are not told in books, but are whispered by the wind in the leaves of a forest that has been waiting patiently for us to come and listen. And as we carry that silence with us, back into our world, a world of screens and glowing lights, it is one of the great and beautiful surprises of our time to find that this story, this ancient whisper, has been carried forward too. It has been heard, translated, and woven into a mythology for a new age. A mythology not of gods on a mountaintop, but of a quiet hero in a green tunic, and a forest guardian with a face of gnarled bark and a voice like the creaking of ancient boughs. We leave the mists of Yakushima, the sacred groves of Ise, and we find ourselves standing in a different kind of forest. The light is soft here too, filtering through a canopy of pixels. There is a sound, a gentle looping melody that is at once playful and deeply peaceful. And in the heart of this clearing stands a tree, but not just any tree. This is the Great Deku Tree. To call it a tree feels like an understatement, much like calling the Jomon Sugi a simple cedar. It is a landmark, a living castle, a being whose roots seem to grip not just the soil, but the very soul of the world it inhabits. Its trunk is impossibly vast, a universe of bark fissured with age. Lichens and mosses, rendered in shades of digital green, cling to its sides. And high above, a face, two kind, knowing eyes, and a mouth framed by what looks like a great leafy moustache. It is a design that could so easily have been comical, yet it isn't. It is stately. It is ancient. It is in its own way sacred. This is where our journey culminates. Here, in this digital space, we can see the echoes of everything we have witnessed. The creators of this world, the legend of Zelda, were not simply designing a fantasy creature. They were performing a masterful act of cultural translation, taking the deep, nuanced concepts of Shinto belief and the profound reverence for nature that permeates Japanese culture, and giving it a new form, a new voice, for a global audience. They took the idea of the Shinboku, the sacred tree, and gave it a name and a quest. Let's begin where the game itself begins for so many, in Ocarina of Time. We find ourselves in the Kokiri Forest, a secluded village of eternal children nestled at the foot of their guardian. This forest is, in every functional way, a Chinju no Mori, a sacred grove that protects a community. The children, the Kokiri, cannot leave the forest, or it is said they will perish. Their entire world, their safety, their identity, is intrinsically tied to the health and presence of their patron. The Deku Tree is not just a feature of their landscape, it is the source of their existence, the anchor of their reality. He is their shrine, their community hall, and their king, all in one. This directly mirrors the role of a Shinboku in a traditional village. The sacred Camphor, or cedar, was the spiritual center. Its presence was believed to ward off misfortune, to ensure good harvests, to maintain the balance of the community. People lived their lives in its shadow, their daily rhythms dictated by its silent, steadfast presence. The tree was the protector, and when we first meet the Great Deku Tree, this is his primary role. He is the guardian who has, for untold years, maintained the peaceful equilibrium of his forest home. There is an almost invisible barrier, a magical quality that separates the Kokiri forest from the dangers of the world outside. This is the Shimenawa rope, made manifest not as woven straw, but as an aura of protective energy. The tree's very life force is the sacred boundary that keeps his children safe. But his role is deeper than that of a simple guardian. He is also the sage. When the story needs to begin, when the hero must be called, it is the Deku Tree who speaks. His voice is slow, ponderous, resonating with an impossible age. He holds the history of the world in his heartwood. He understands the currents of time and the movements of destiny. He is the one who explains the nature of the three spiritual stones, the Triforce, the looming threat of the man from the desert. He is a living library, an oracle whose knowledge is not written in ink, but is accumulated in growth rings. This is a direct translation of the belief that ancient trees are witnesses. A tree that has lived for 1,000 years has seen empires rise and fall. It has felt the sun of 1,000 summers and the frost of 1,000 winters. It has stood through droughts, floods, fires, and peace. In the Shinto worldview, this immense age makes the tree a natural vessel for a kami, a spirit, a divine presence. The wisdom is not just symbolic, it is literal. The tree knows. And so the Great Deku Tree isn't just a wise character, he is the embodiment of the belief that nature itself is a repository of deep, ancient wisdom. We as the player are asked to go to this ancient being, not to cut it down for resources, but to listen to it. In that simple act, the game subtly instills a core tenet of apological reverence, that the natural world has something to teach us if we have the humility to listen. To listen, we must first enter, and the act of entering the Great Deku Tree is one of the most profound metaphors in the entire series. We are not climbing its branches, we are delving into its very body. The first dungeon of the game is not a stone castle or a crypt, but a journey through the vascular system of a living being. We climb its inner walls, which are like the xylem and phloem that carry water and nutrients from root to leaf. We fight monsters that are not invaders from outside, but a sickness, a corruption that has taken root within him. We are acting as a kind of microscopic surgeon, a single cell of the immune system, trying to purge a living system of a terrible disease. The creature at the heart of the decay is Queen Golma, a parasitic arthropod. Her presence within the Deku Tree is a perfect biological analogy. In the real world, ancient trees are in a constant, slow-motion battle with insects, fungi, and disease. The relationship is complex. Some fungi are symbiotic, like the mycorrhizal networks we have explored, a quiet underground internet of shared resources. But others are parasitic, slowly consuming the tree from the inside out, hollowing out its heartwood. The battle against Goma is a dramatization of this very real, very slow, and often invisible struggle for life that every ancient tree endures. We are shrinking down and participating in the biological defense of a forest monarch. And this leads to the Deku Tree's third, and perhaps most powerful role, the martyr. Despite our best efforts, we cannot save him. The curse has taken too deep a hold. After we emerge, victorious but too late, the Great Deku Tree uses his final breaths to entrust the hero with his quest and the spiritual stone of the forest. And then, he withers, his leaves fall, his bark turns grey, he dies. In a typical fantasy narrative, this would be a simple tragedy. The wise old mentor is gone. But here, informed by the philosophies of Shinto and the realities of biology, it is something more. It is part of a cycle. A great tree's death in a forest is not an ending. It is a monumental event that sparks an explosion of new life. The massive trunk, now fallen or standing as a snag, becomes what is known as a nurse log. It is a fortress of decaying wood that provides nutrients, moisture, and shelter for countless organisms. Fungi and bacteria, the great recyclers of the forest, begin the slow work of breaking down its complex lignins and cellulose. Mosses and ferns colonize its surface, creating a damp, rich carpet. Insects and salamanders make their homes in its hollows, and most importantly, new seeds, falling from the canopy above, find a perfect, nutrient-rich seedbed on its back. The death of the one becomes the foundation for the lives of thousands. The forest does not mourn in stillness, it celebrates death with a riot of rebirth. And this is precisely what happens in the world of the game. The Deku Tree's death is not the end of his line. He leaves behind a seed, a Deku sprout, that grows in his place. When the hero returns as an adult 7 years later, a young, vibrant tree is growing where the ancient one stood. The wisdom, the spirit of the guardian, has been passed on. It is the Shinto concept of renewal, of the spirit of a shrine being passed from an old wooden structure to a new one, but applied to a living being. The spirit, the kami, is eternal, even if the vessel is transient. The Deku Tree understands this. His death is a sacrifice, but it is a knowing one, a necessary step in the great turning wheel of life, death, and rebirth. He is the ultimate nurse log, and his decay fertilizes the courage of the hero who will go on to save the world. Now, let's turn our attention to the children of the forest. The Kokiri are a fascinating first step in translating the idea of forest spirits. They look like human children, but they are intrinsically tied to the forest. They are, in a sense, the first attempt at visualizing Kodama, the spirits said to dwell in trees. The Kodama were often thought to be unseen, their presence only felt or heard as a strange echo in the woods. Giving them a humanoid form makes them relatable, characters we can speak to. Their inability to leave the forest is a literal interpretation of a spirit being bound to its sacred space, its tree. But as the mythology of the series deepened, so did this interpretation. Centuries later in the game's timeline, in the Wind Waker, the world has been flooded. The landscape has been utterly transformed, and the Kokiri have transformed with it. They have evolved. Now they are the Koroks. This design is a work of genius, a perfect synthesis of the ancient belief and playful modern character design. The Koroks are small, wooden creatures. Their bodies are simple, almost like little walking seeds, and their faces are obscured by masks made from leaves. Each mask is unique, a different species of leaf, giving each Korok its own personality, just as every leaf on a tree is subtly different. They no longer look human at all. They look like what they are, the animate spirit of the woods. They are the Kodama, made manifest, more literally and more creatively than ever before. Their sounds are not human words, but chimes, rustles, and a joyful little exclamation. Yaha! It sounds like a seed pod rattling, like leaves skittering in the wind. Their movements are quick and light. They are shy, playful, and elusive. The game designers have captured the feeling of being in a forest, that sense that you are not alone, that little movements in your peripheral vision might be a creature, or might just be the wind. Finding a Korok is a moment of small, quiet joy, a confirmation that the world is alive with hidden magic. In The Wind Waker, their role is deeply tied to the theme of rebirth and resilience. The Great Deku Tree reappears, this time on an island, a lone sanctuary in a vast ocean, and he explains that the Koroks are his children, and their sacred duty is to travel on the winds, carrying his seeds to other islands, to plant new forests and bit by bit bring the land back together. They are agents of reforestation. They are living seeds, little Johnny Apple seeds of a magical world. Each Korok is a promise, a down payment on a future forest. This is a beautiful gamified version of ecological succession. The seeds of a pioneer species, the first to colonize a barren land, are often carried by wind or water to new shores. The Koroks are the spiritual embodiment of this process. They are nature's patient, determined, and ultimately hopeful expansion into a wounded world. This idea reaches its zenith in Breath of the Wild. Here the world is not flooded, but is a vast, open, wild landscape, a kingdom recovering from a great calamity. And hidden throughout this immense world are 900 Koroks. They are tucked away under rocks, in the tops of trees, beneath lily pads, waiting to be found. The act of finding them is a central part of exploring the world. To find a Korok, you have to learn to see the world not as a human does, but as a forest spirit might. You have to notice the out-of-place rock, the ring of flowers that seems too perfect, the pinwheel spinning on a lonely peak. You have to engage with the landscape on an intimate, curious level. Each time you find one, you are rewarded with a Korok seed, and these seeds are given to a large musical Korok named Hestu, who uses them to expand your inventory, allowing you to carry more weapons and shields. On the surface, this is a simple gameplay mechanic, but look at the metaphor. You are finding the scattered spirits of the forest, the very seeds of its life force. And in return for finding them, for re-engaging with the hidden life of the world, you are granted the ability to carry more, to endure more, to become stronger. Your strength as a hero is directly proportional to how much attention you pay to the small hidden wonders of the natural world. It is a system that quietly teaches the player that power and resilience come from a deep connection with nature. The great calamity that scarred this land was a technological one, a blight of twisted machinery. The Koroks, in their simple, organic nature, represent the opposite. They are the antidote. They are the slow, patient, joyful process of nature's recovery. Finding all 900 is a monumental task, but it's not a chore. It is a long, meditative pilgrimage that forces you to slow down, to look closer, to appreciate the beauty of the world on its own terms. It is the digital equivalent of Shinrin-yoku, of forest bathing. The game's designers have woven this ancient practice, this reverence for the unseen spirits of the wild, into the very fabric of the gameplay loop. And so we see the complete translation. The Shinboku, the single sacred guardian tree, becomes the Great Deku Tree, a guardian, a sage, a martyr, and a symbol of rebirth. And the Kodama, the countless unseen spirits of the forest, become the Kokiri, and then the Koroks, the children of the tree, the playful hidden seed-bearers of nature's resilience. The visual and auditory design reinforces this at every turn. The Great Deku Tree in Breath of the Wild is ancient beyond measure, stationed in his own sacred grove, the Korok Forest. He is covered in a lush ecosystem of mosses and fungi, just like the ancient cedars of Japan. A small shrine, a tiny stone lantern, often sits near such trees in the real world. In Hyrule, an entire village of Koroks lives in his hollows, and the Master Sword itself, the blade of the hero, rests in a pedestal before him. He is the guardian of the kingdom's most sacred artifact. The tree is the ultimate shrine. The music of these places is always distinct. It is not the bombastic, heroic score of a battle. It is quiet, gentle, and often slightly mysterious. It uses woodwinds and soft percussive sounds that mimic the natural acoustics of a forest, the rustle of leaves, the tapping of a woodpecker, the bubbling of a hidden spring. The sound design invites you into a state of calm contemplation, mirroring the quiet you feel when you step into a towering grove and the sounds of the human world fall away. What makes this translation so powerful, so enduring, is that it is not a shallow appropriation. It is not just borrowing the aesthetic of a wise old tree with a face. It is a deep, respectful, and incredibly creative adaptation of the underlying philosophy. The creators of Zelda took the animistic belief that the entire world is alive and spirited, and they made it the central interactive principle of their game. They don't just tell you that the forest is sacred, they make you feel it. They make you protect it, listen to it, heal it from within, and celebrate its rebirth. They make you spend hours searching for its hidden children, finding joy in the smallest of discoveries. They have succeeded in encoding an ancient system of ecological reverence into one of the most popular mythologies of the modern world. Millions of people who may never visit a Shinto shrine or see a 1,000-year-old camphor tree have, through this game, been taught to see a forest not as a collection of resources, but as a living entity, full of wisdom, spirit, and hidden life. They have been taught that the death of one great being can be the foundation of a new world, and that the smallest seeds of hope can be carried on the wind to heal a wounded landscape. And so, as we end our journey, the lines begin to blur. The feeling of standing at the foot of the Jomon Sugi, dwarfed by its immense quiet power, and the feeling of standing before the Great Deku Tree as a tiny hero in green, are not so different. One is real, a being of cellulose and lignin, a product of 4,000 years of sunlight and rain. The other is digital, a being of polygons and code, a product of human artistry and imagination. But both are vessels for the same story, a story of endurance, of wisdom, of the deep and unbreakable connection between life and the land that sustains it. The whisper in the leaves of the sacred grove has found a new way to travel. It has passed through the minds and hearts of artists and programmers, been translated into a new language of light and sound, and now echoes in consoles and on screens all across the world. It is an ancient story for a new generation, a quiet, powerful reminder that there is magic in the woods if we only remember to look and to listen, and that even in a world of complex technology, the most profound and enduring guardian we will ever know is a tree, and its children are still out there, hidden all around us, waiting patiently for us to find them.